So in the previous step of Iris, we took a look at how we're going to stack a series of data through the course of the night. Perhaps 2, perhaps as many as 10 or 20 can be cut through quite quickly by moving the files from Ninox into Iris, stacking them and saving them. Now we have this night, the 26th, we're looking at this particular image set here, and I've actually stacked 500 this time. Now it looks a little bit better, a little bit brighter. The keen amongst you in the crowd may notice that at a 1 level zoom here, this is quite a large image, especially given that I image through an 8-inch telescope, at this current time I do at least. And this is because I used a resize function in Ninox. If you look at the documented tutorial portion, you'll see that this has been known to reduce artifacts. Now this is a raw stack of red, green, and blue with no sharpening applied. And if you wanted to do this the down and dirty way, we can just bring up the wavelet enhancement from processing and begin applying wavelets right away. You'll notice that there's quite a dramatic effect that this can have just by pulling these levels up from raw stacks. You play around with these settings to find what works for you. Typically, I wouldn't apply wavelets directly to the raw images themselves, but if you'd like to see a 200 level zoom and here's a 150 level zoom, you see moving from the 300% down to closer to the natural image scale, you see quite a dramatic improvement just by enhancing with wavelets alone. I typically will follow this command flow here of loading the red and applying specific wavelets, again from processing. Wavelet. I wish there was a way I could recall saved wavelets like in Registax, but I have not found a way to do that. However, once you have them set, they will stay there from pull down to pull down. You notice this detail pops right out pretty readily. Sometimes you can apply an unsharp mask. That might be a little too much, but I'll show you what it looks like anyways. The red 0 is a raw stack. I then save it as red 8.1 just for versioning's sake. I do the same to the green and again to the blue. The wavelets are still saved there. Hit it with some unsharp mask, save it as green. You notice how quickly you can step through even a particular capture's amount of data fairly quickly. Unsharp mask, save it. And I left a little note for myself here. This doesn't actually issue a command when I hit return at the end of the line. But if I go to view RGB, I can combine it again manually. This also allows you to offset the channels if they're misaligned ever so slightly. Move that out of the way. So now I hit apply. Okay, now I'm working with slightly more sharpened data with each of the subchannels. So I set the step value here to something other than 0 so it actually moves. So I'm going to grab the red, move it to the left a little bit. You notice if I align it on the moon IO here, it sharpens a little better. Move the blue back. Sharpens quite nicely. Sometimes I will save multiple image formats and combine them later. The moons tend to move at a different rate for Jupiter than the cloud bands do, but that's okay. Once I've done this, now I can begin a white balance. A lot of folks end up with miscolored or misbalanced images, but the easiest thing to do is grab a white area of the polar caps on Mars, the rings of Saturn, once they're visible again, or a white band of Jupiter, select it, and then click white. It will actually give you the white balance format here, a little bit more red, the same amount of green, and a little bit less blue. And you notice there's some speckled noise in the background here. We can, with a bright object like Jupiter, just nix that real easily by selecting a black point and issuing the black command, and that tends to make that disappear. And at this point I'll save it as a file here. Now I'm going to scale it from 300 down to 200%. It's looking pretty good. I will sometimes apply some more wavelets. In this case, quite a bit less than before. I've noticed that when you apply wavelets at different zoom levels, you end up doing slightly different things to it, but again, you have to play around with it and see where the sweet spot lies. You say, okay, get a little bit more pop of detail there. Save this one again. One of the things that I do enjoy tremendously is issuing the saturation command on this. It's not an actual command, but it's in the drop down here under View, Saturation. It might be a little bit too much, but I think it tends to pop the view a little bit more. I've overblown the center part a little bit here. Softening, there's a Gauss command that you can issue here, and you notice it gets quite soft quite quickly. There's also another one that's a little bit more gentle here under Processing, Blur Filter, and you can issue this one iteratively. That softens it up real nice there too. You can play around the visual levels manually, or you can just hit it with predefined settings from the command menu there. The other thing you can do is raise that black point up. That gets rid of a lot of the background noise as well. And then the next thing you do is save it as a particular file name that another Iris script will then do a bunch of things to. So this particular file name here, RGB8A, that an Iris script calls, by running this script here, you'll see it flashes a few times, and what it's doing there is loading that file, saving it as different zoom levels, saves it as 100%, saves it as 75, which is what this one is, but here's the 200% zoom, as the 150, and then again, if you wanted to, you can type scale to 0.5, 0.5. Now this takes it from 200% to 100%, and that's a 100% zoomed image there. So I did that within a couple of minutes. There's some other ways that you can do this. This is my own technique, my own processing method, and I hope it works for you. I'm going to include some other ones on how to use Astra Image as well. But essentially at this point, we're done with this particular capture set, and again, I can hit the enter button and it'll step forward, and I can begin running through the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. Again, stacking, loading the raws, applying the processing settings. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, it was fairly easy. I went from capture routine to Ninox to Iris, and then I was done, and I did it in a batch automated fashion. So I hope you recognize the power of this. Don't be afraid to rip through lots of data, and you can find the best capture in the night within minutes almost. So please submit some feedback for me. Let me know if you thought